Let me start by setting a scene for you all. It's Sunday morning, 2 a.m., out there in Southwater Square. Me and a team of street pastors are just thinking about finishing up for the night. And we spot out of the corner of our eye some movements in the shadow of one of the buildings. And we decide to go and investigate. And we find there a man who basically has nothing but the clothes on his back, a pack of cigarettes and a lighter, and he looks incredibly scared as we approach. So we go and speak to this man and very quickly discover that he has incredibly limited English, but we managed to ascertain from him that he has come all the way from Sudan. And this man is the epitome of vulnerability. He has no food, no resources, he can't speak the local language. He has nowhere to stay that night. He's intending to stay out on the streets. And of course we spend some time with him and we try and help him. But I start with that story because he was a foreigner in the UK and really, really vulnerable and really, really scared. And you could see that in his eyes, in his demeanor, and in the resources he had available to him. And this morning we're looking at the story of Daniel. And Daniel was a foreigner, as Laura has already explained. He was actually a slave captured in war. Right at the start of the book of Daniel, the then king of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, goes and he attacks the nation of Judah and he destroys the city of Jerusalem. And as part of that attack on Jerusalem, he enslaves some of the best and the brightest of that nation and brings them back to Babylon. And Daniel is one of those people, and you can read about it at the end of 2 Kings and at the start of the book of Daniel if you want to find out more. But we actually catch up with Daniel on this story quite a number of years later. Historians reckon about 5 decades later this story is set. And so Daniel is a lot older now. But unlike the man that I met out on the street over there, Daniel does not put across this vulnerable demeanor. Daniel is actually thriving and doing really well in the setting that he finds himself. As I was preparing for this morning, I thought about that. And I thought about us as men and women and children who are part of the kingdom of God. And actually, when we become Christians, we become members of a new kingdom, of a new civilization, of a new citizenship. And that actually means that to the world, we are like foreigners. We are people who don't fit in. We are called to stand out and to be different from the world and from the culture around us. And so, how can we do that like Daniel? How can we do that in a way that we thrive and that we're shining lights to the people around us? And so that's what we're going to explore together this morning. And we're going to do that by looking at a few of the characters that come out of the story that we've just heard read. And so we're going to start with Daniel. Daniel did excellent living. Daniel pursued excellence in the way that he lived. We open the story in the opening verses to hear that Daniel was so good that the king wanted to put him over everything in the kingdom, to make him the most powerful man second to him in the kingdom. But if that were not endorsement enough, his enemies, the other politicians, looked into a way to try and get rid of him. And even they had to admit that he was so good at his job and he was so trustworthy that they could find no grounds in his job to get rid of him. You know that you are endorsed about your work when your enemies think that you're really good. And that was Daniel. about a year ago to the day, I started a new job. And I've always put the fact that I'm a Christian on my CV. It's just something that I feel I really want to be open and honest about with people. But I didn't really think much far beyond that. And then I started the first day of this job, and I met one of the managers who'd interviewed me, a guy called Dave. He's a bit of a character. And Dave took me into the office, and as is the way when you start a new job, he started introducing me to some of my new colleagues. And so we walk up to the first colleague, and he says, I'd like you to introduce you to James. He's the new project manager, and he's a Christian. I thought, this is different. I'd not experienced this before, and I thought, well, maybe this is just a one-off. Let's see how the day continues. And so he then moves on to the next colleague, and he says, this is our new project manager. His name's James, and he's a Christian. So in my mind, I don't actually have a problem with people finding out that I'm a Christian, but I'm a bit of a control freak. It's why I do the job that I do. And I like to be in control of the terms with which people find out about me. But Dave was completely oblivious to this. By the end of the day, I think I'd met about 30 different people. And they knew exactly 3 things about me. They knew my name, they knew my job title, and they knew that I was a Christian. I was very embarrassed, I have to be honest, I was. But I came away from that day thinking, what was that about, God? And as I've reflected on it more since then, I've got the sense that God was giving me a platform to demonstrate what it means to be a Christian to these people in the workplace. I work with a lot of Muslims, I work with a lot of Sikhs, I work with a lot of Hindus and a lot of atheists. To my knowledge, in my department, I don't know of anyone who is a self-professing Christian. And actually, we live in a world where we are bombarded with people saying lots of things. You know, we have YouTube influencers and politicians and celebrities. We have the news, and we have music, and we have films and TV, and everyone vying for our attention with noise and voices coming at us. And actually, we learn very quickly that talk is cheap. That actually, people want to know, do we really live out what we say we believe? And so the world does that. The world watches people like us, people like you and me, and they say, well, you talk a good game, you say all of these things. Do you live it out? And I suppose that's the sense that I had when I was at work, that I had been put in a position where I could live out what it meant to be a Christian in front of these people. Wouldn't it be amazing if the word Christian became synonymous with words like excellence, integrous, hardworking, diligent, generous, merciful, honest, and on and on and on. Daniel believed in excellent living. He believed in excellence in what he did. Even though he worked for a foreign country, even though he'd been enslaved there, captured there, taken there as a teenager, and lived under the rule of many kings who possibly could be described as tyrants in some ways. He believed in excellent living. I want to say to you, don't give up pursuing a life of excellence, because through it, the world becomes aware that we actually live out what we believe, and we earn the right to then be able to talk to them about Jesus and who he is and what he's done for us. So then let's move on to Daniel's enemies, the politicians. So Daniel had some enemies, and they were his enemies because they were jealous. They were jealous of his success. They were jealous of the favor that he had from the king at the time, and they were concerned about him gaining power over them. So they go to the king, and they persuade the king to make this law. They say, we've got this great idea, King Darius. We think you should make this law that for the next 30 days, everyone should pray to and worship only you. And anyone who doesn't we're going to get rid of them. We'll throw them in the pit of lions to execute them. And the king agrees to this, and the law is written. And then Daniel, who is consistent, and Daniel, who cares more about honoring God than his own life, continues to do what he has always done. And he prays to God 3 times a day. And he's consistent in worshiping God. If we are foreigners in this world, if we are people who live a different culture, a counterculture to the world around us representing Jesus, then there's no easy ways to say this. We're going to have enemies. We're going to have people who simply don't like us. And they don't like us probably for many different reasons, and we could go into the whys and wherefores of why that is. But the truth is they're not going to like us. We're going to get reactions from people. But I think the way Daniel reacts to his enemies is to not be a chameleon, to not change or adjust who he is just because of other people's opinions of him. He stays true to who he is and true to the God that he worships. We have this picture hanging in our lounge. Usually, it's a poster that my wife bought. It's by an artist called Charlie Mackesy, which maybe some of you have heard of, and it's an extract from a book that he wrote, and it very simply says this. It says, "What do you think the biggest waste of time is? The biggest waste of time? Comparing yourself to others," said the mole. And that hangs in our lounge and reminds us that actually there's lots of people in this world who will have lots of opinions about who they think we should be and how they think we should act. And there's going to be people who simply don't like us because we stand for what is true and good and righteous in this world. We pursue excellent living. But I want to encourage you this morning to be you unapologetically. Be you unapologetically. No one else can be you in this world. You were made unique by God. And so I want to encourage you to own that, like Daniel did. Don't give up being you, because when we are consistent in the way that we are and consistent in the approach of worshiping God, then yes, some people won't like us. But I have found, in my experience, that over time we can actually win some people over too. Some people look at our lives and go, I want to have what you have. I want to experience that life that you seem to have. Tell me, why are you different? How are you different? What is that about? And when we're consistent, people are able to be won over and see that in us. Then we come to Darius. Darius, unlike Laura, I appreciate, Laura, that you love Daniel. Darius, for me, is the character that I like the best in this story. And I'm going to try and explain why. Before I do that, I don't know whether anyone else does this, but I have this nasty habit, and I think other people do too, of categorizing other people. I don't know whether you've ever done this, but I think we do it quite a lot. We look at someone and we say, they're tall or they're short, they're educated or they're not, they like this or they like that. And we put people into boxes all the time. And one of the things that we like to do, particularly as Christians, is, are they good or are they bad? Have you ever done that? Have you ever tried to categorize people and say, well, do they fit into the good mold or the bad mold? And we do it particularly when we read Bible stories. When we read Bible stories, we try to pick out the characters and say, well, are they good guys or are they bad guys? And so we can do that with the story that we've had this morning. So we look at the characters in the story and we say, okay, Daniel, was he a good guy or a bad guy? Oh, he's definitely a good guy. He does all the right things and he worships God. Definitely a good guy. And then we can look at Daniel's enemies, the politicians who were jealous and conniving and trying to kill Daniel, and we could say, definitely bad guys. They fall into the bad guy category really, really nicely. But then we come to King Darius, and this is where we hit a bit of a stumbling block. Because we go through King Darius' story and we say, okay, King Darius, he really liked Daniel. Well, he's obviously a good guy then. And he wants to put Daniel in charge of everyone. Definitely a good guy. But then he seems persuaded by the other politicians that really everyone should be worshipping him. And so he writes a law that says everyone has to do that or they'll get executed. Maybe not such a good guy. And then Daniel gets caught and he throws Daniel into the lion's den. Not such a good guy. And then we find that he mourns the fact that Daniel is in the lion's den, that he can't eat or sleep or take any entertainment. And we see the relief that he has when he finds that Daniel has miraculously survived the lions. And we say, okay, well, he must be a good guy. And then he proceeds to throw the men who had persuaded him to make this law into the lion's den. Perhaps not such a good guy. And then he proceeds to throw their wives into the lion's den, and then their children into the lion's den. Not such a good guy then. You see, he doesn't fit into one of those categories. And the reason that I like Darius so much is that out of all the characters in the story, he is the most human. He is the one that is most true to humanity. He is a mix of good and evil. He is both vain and humble. He is confused and then clear-minded. He is a mix. Let me tell you one of the biggest lies and fears that I have had to battle with in my life, and it comes back again and again, and it's one that I have to give to God again and again. It's this: you are not good enough. You are not good enough for God. You have not met the mark. You need to do better. I don't know, anyone else relate to that fear? Anyone else relate to that lie? Yeah, a few people. And the reason that lie has such power is because it's based on a seed of truth. And the truth is, you and I are a mix. We're a mix of some excellent and really good bits and some really bad bits. Yeah? I am, at least, anyway. You know, though God's grace is not reliant on our performance. And if we want to be effective people of the kingdom of God in this world, to be different from the people of the world around us, then we've got to learn to not get tripped up with that lie. Don't give up living for God in the face of your weaknesses. You can thank God that He is committed to the work of sanctification in each of you. That work of changing you as you journey with Him to be more like Him. That's what He's committed to each one of us to do if we invite Him into our lives, to journey with us and to continue to change us. And He doesn't give up. And so the call for us is to not give up, not be undone by that lie, but to accept the truth that in God's grace we stand. In God's grace we will move forward in this world and we represent His kingdom. So don't give up living for God in the face of your weaknesses. I'm going to invite the band back up, but while they come, I just wanted to close with this. I started this morning by talking about foreigners and how we are called to be those who are different in the world, called to be those who stand out, but also called to be people who thrive and who bring life to the world around us. Don't give up pursuing life, a life of excellence. Don't give up being you. Don't give up living for God in the face of your weaknesses. As we live different from the world around us, they get to see the kingdom of God at work. They get to see who Jesus is through us and through our lives. And that way we can have an impact on the world around us and the world in Telford. I'm going to finish with these words that I think summarize this God that we serve, this God who's called us to live differently. And they're words from King Darius at the end of the story. And he says this: "For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions."